Many years ago, in the small, sun-drenched village of Kofakrom, there lived an old man named Papa Kwaku. This man was not just old, he was ancient, a living relic that the people of Kofakrom had known for generations. At 154 years old, Papa Kwaku had seen the birth of men who were now grandfathers themselves, and had buried friends who had lived long and full lives. Yet, he remained, his body frail but his spirit stubbornly clinging to life. He lived in a small, weathered hut at the very edge of the village, a place most people avoided. Children were warned not to go near it, and adults would hurry past, casting fearful glances towards his door. Papa Kwaku was not just old, he was a man shrouded in a dark and terrible reputation, a reputation that had earned him the fear and resentment of everyone in Kofakrom. His continued existence was a mystery, a curse that the village could not seem to shake. The villagers whispered that he was an evil man who simply refused to die. If only they knew the real reason for his unnaturally long life, they would not fear him, they would weep for him. Papa Kwaku was once a young, vibrant man named Kwaku, full of life and promise. He was the strongest farmer in Kofakrom, his hands capable of coaxing life from the most stubborn soil. He was married to a beautiful woman named Adina, whose laughter was said to be sweeter than the ripest mango. They had a son, Kofi, a bright and energetic boy who was the mirror image of his father. Kwaku's life was perfect. He had a loving family, the respect of his community, and a future that seemed as bright as the morning sun. He worked hard on his farm, providing for his family and sharing his bounty with his neighbors. He was a good man, a pillar of the community, and everyone loved him. But the spirits, it seemed, were jealous of his happiness. One fateful afternoon, a shadow fell over his perfect life, a shadow so dark it would extinguish all the light he had ever known. It happened during the Harmattan season, when the air was dry and the winds were fierce. A small fire, started by a careless traveller at the edge of the village, was fanned by the strong winds and quickly grew into a raging inferno. The fire swept through the dry fields and headed straight for the village. Panic erupted as people scrambled to save their homes and their families. Kwaku, being the brave man he was at the forefront of the fight, helping his neighbors and trying to create a firebreak to stop the blaze. In the chaos, he lost sight of Adina and Kofi. When the fire was finally brought under control, much of the village was reduced to smoldering ash. Kwaku searched frantically through the ruins, his heart pounding with a terror he had never felt before. He called out their names, his voice hoarse with smoke and fear, but only the crackling of the dying flames answered him. He found what was left of his home, a pile of charred wood and blackened earth. And there, huddled together, he found them. Adina and little Kofi had not been able to escape. The sight shattered Kwaku's world into a million pieces. The strong, vibrant man died that day, and in his place was a hollow shell, a man consumed by a grief so profound it was like a physical wound. He did not cry, he could not. The pain was too deep for tears. He sat amidst the ruins of his life for 3 days and 3 nights, unresponsive to the villagers who tried to comfort him. On the 4th day, he rose. The man who stood up was no longer Kwaku the farmer. He was a man with a singular, terrifying purpose. He would not let death have the final say. He would bring his family back, no matter the cost. Driven by his grief and a desperate, mad hope, Kwaku ventured deep into the forbidden forest, a place whispered to be the dwelling of ancient and powerful spirits. He sought out the most feared entity known to the people of the region, a malevolent spirit called the Soul Weaver. Legend said the Soul Weaver could manipulate the very threads of life and death, but always for a terrible price. Kwaku, with nothing left to lose, found the ancient, gnarled tree where the spirit was said to reside. He called out to it, offering his own life, his soul, anything, in exchange for the return of his wife and son. The air grew cold, and a voice, like the rustling of dead leaves, echoed in his mind. The Soul Weaver appeared before him, a swirling mass of shadow and malice. It listened to Kwaku's plea with cold amusement. The spirit agreed to his request, but its price was far more cruel than Kwaku could have ever imagined. It would not take his life. Instead, it would grant him an unnaturally long one. The Soul Weaver explained the terms of their dark pact. Adina and Kofi would be returned to him, but they would be trapped in a state between life and death, their spirits bound to the mortal world but their bodies unable to rejoin it. They would exist as unseen presences, forever near him, but unable to touch, speak, or be seen by anyone. And as for Kwaku, he would be cursed to live until he had experienced the pain of 100 lifetimes. He would live for 154 years, watching everyone he ever knew grow old and die, his body withering but his life force refusing to fade. Only after he had endured this agonizingly long penance would the curse be broken. Only then would he be allowed to die and finally be reunited with his family in the afterlife. In his desperate grief, Kwaku agreed. He would endure any torment to have them near him again. The moment he agreed, a searing pain shot through him, and he felt a cold, ancient magic seep into his very bones. When he returned to the village, he was a changed man. His eyes held a deep, ancient sorrow, and a strange aura of coldness clung to him. As the spirit had promised, he could feel Adina and Kofi. He could feel their presence in his hut, a faint warmth by the fireside, a gentle stir in the air. He would speak to them for hours, telling them about his day, recounting old memories. But their only reply was silence. He was surrounded by the family he loved, yet he was utterly alone. The villagers, unaware of his tragic pact, saw only a man who had gone mad with grief. They saw him talking to himself, staring at empty spaces, and they began to fear him. Years turned into decades. Kwaku, now known as Papa Kwaku, watched his friends and neighbors grow old. He attended their funerals, a solitary, gaunt figure standing at the back, his heart aching with a loneliness that was almost unbearable. He saw new generations being born, children who grew up hearing fearsome stories about the strange old man at the edge of the village. They called him a warlock, an evil sorcerer who had traded his soul for eternal life. The more he withdrew into his solitary world, the more the rumors grew. They blamed him for every misfortune that befell the village, a failed harvest, a sudden illness, a dry well. He was the scapegoat for all their fears. He became a monster in their stories, the evil grandfather who refused to die. Papa Kwaku bore their hatred in silence. How could he explain the truth? How could he tell them that he was not clinging to life, but that life was clinging to him, a cruel punishment for a love that was too strong? How could he describe the agony of feeling his wife's spectral presence next to him every night, yet being unable to hold her? Or the torment of hearing the faint, ghostly echo of his son's laughter, a sound only he could perceive, a constant reminder of everything he had lost? He accepted his fate, his isolation a part of his penance. His once strong body became frail and bent, his skin a map of wrinkles, but his eyes, clear and sharp, held the wisdom and sorrow of 154 agonizing years. His only connection to the living world was a young girl named Akua. She was an orphan, a kind-hearted child who, unlike the others, was not afraid of him. She would sometimes leave a small bowl of soup or a piece of fruit at his doorstep. She saw not a monster, but a lonely old man. One day, she found him collapsed outside his hut, his breathing shallow. Ignoring the warnings of the villagers, she helped him inside and cared for him. As he lay there, drifting between consciousness and memory, he began to speak, his voice a frail whisper. He told her everything, about Adina and Kofi, the fire, the pact with the Soul Weaver, and the century of silent suffering. Akua listened, tears streaming down her face, her heart breaking for the man the village had so cruelly misjudged. As Papa Kwaku spoke his final words, a gentle smile touched his lips. He looked at a corner of the hut, and for the first time in over a century, a look of pure, unadulterated joy filled his eyes. Adina, he whispered, his voice full of love and relief. Kofi, I am coming. A final, peaceful breath left his withered body. At that exact moment, Akua felt a gentle breeze sweep through the hut, a breeze that felt like a warm embrace, and for just a fleeting second she thought she heard the sweet sound of a woman's laughter and the joyful shout of a young boy. The curse was finally broken. The 154 years of penance were over. The man the village called evil was finally free, reunited at last with the family for whom he had endured it all. The story of Papa Kwaku was not one of evil, but of a love that transcended life and death, and a sacrifice that no one had ever understood.